Welcome to the New Hampshire Union Leaders Voters First Forums. My name is Joe McQuaid, publisher of the Union Leader.
And I'm Todd Fahey, State Director of AARP New Hampshire. AARP is a nonpartisan advocacy organization. We're looking forward to hearing candidate positions on important issues. This year, we're focused on Social Security and what candidates will do to ensure that this program remains strong and available for future generations.
If you're watching this live on YouTube, feel free to submit a question. And now, let's hear from a candidate. Thanks for coming in, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. McQuaid.
I'm here with Trent and Dan. Dan, 24/7 political reporter. Trent, we're not sure what he does, but he claims to be executive editor. And you said you didn't mind gotcha questions, so here's two right out of the chute.
Sure.
On the Planned Parenthood funding.
Yes.
You opposed the Planned Parenthood funding when they were under investigation for perhaps selling unborn baby body parts. You are now in favor of the funding. I take it then that you have no problem with Planned Parenthood representatives discussing the at-cost price over wine and cheese of baby parts. No problem?
Oh, no, of course. I think we all had a problem with those videos. I saw those videos, and it's something that when it came up last year, I asked the governor. The governor said she hadn't watched the videos, and I think the two takeaways here. Number one, I've been consistent on the issue. I've supported this contract in the past because it is dollars for health care. Those videos were disgusting. We all saw that. There were 10 investigations going on across the country in various states. We asked for an investigation here in New Hampshire. The governor refused. And at the end of the day, I don't care whether you're a snowplow driver or a landscaper or you're providing health care services. If you're under investigation, the state shouldn't be doing business with you until we figure out what's going on. This year when the contract came, and I supported the contract in the past, and I said no last year, as we should.
You have no problem with supporting an outfit that discusses the at-cost price.
I would never support taxpayer dollars for anything like that. These are dollars for health care services.
Fungible, are they not? If you have taxpayer dollars supporting Planned Parenthood here, that allows Planned Parenthood here to use its dollars. So indirectly, aren't you supporting Planned Parenthood?
I'm supporting the women, the children, and even some of the men in my district who rely on those funds for basic health care services.
And they can't get it anywhere else?
So, no. No,
you were in my office a few weeks ago, and you said that you had approached some medical outfits to
bid on that contract. Yes, I think that would have been a great idea.
You were turned down. I reached out and spoke to one of those, and they said they never heard from you. So can you tell us today which medical outfits you specifically approached relative to this contract?
I could. I don't know if it's. I don't want to start calling. No, I got to be honest. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to. I mean, I could. I talked to 4 or 5 different groups in my district, groups that could do these services, groups that were subcontractors sometimes to Planned Parenthood, who because often they outsource some of those secondary services, some of the cancer screenings or the mammograms. I think they would outsource some of that. I talked to 4 or 5 groups, and they all said, it was either not enough money, they didn't want a turf battle. I mean, at the end of the day, we live in my constituents in Rockingham County. We have lots of healthcare facilities that could have provided and bid on that contract.
Right, well,
and if I may, they all refused. Nobody stood up. Nobody bid on it. So I'm the only executive council that doesn't have.
Chris,
yeah, sure.
This was a competitive bid. When you awarded the contract, it was retroactive.
Yes.
So what was happened to the services in the meantime?
That's the way the contract came. If we didn't approve it retroactively, it wasn't going to get improved proactively. I don't, as a counselor, I can't say I like this part of the deal but not that part of the deal. So for me it was, if I wanted to make sure my constituents going forward had access to those services, the retroactive part of it was there. And we have done retroactive health care contracts in the past. All I care about is the constituents.
Aren't you double paying then? Aren't you paying
No, we're
them?
reimbursing them for we've done that with other healthcare providers. We've reimbursed for services already provided. It isn't something we prefer to do, and there's various reasons why, retroactive contracts have come to the council before, but we have done it before. This is about my constituents. It clearly wasn't political because it hurts me politically. It clearly isn't emotional because that's not my job. As an elected official in the state of New Hampshire, representing 250,000 of my constituents, they're my only concern. They are my only concern, not myself, not what's best for me politically.
Okay, we have to
making
agree
sure
to
that they
disagree then, because the concern of some of those 250,000 people is not supporting an abortion facility, which Planned Parenthood
Oh,
is.
and I very much
90%.
respect that part of the
But
argument.
that is your concern.
My concern is for those who use those preventative healthcare services. It's basic physicals, it's cancer screenings, and yes, you claim the money is fungible, but
I don't claim it, it is.
It could
It's
be,
an
but
economic
at the end of
factor
the day,
life.
I've sat with those families, and it's not just women. There are kids, there's even some men that use those services. They're clearly not getting abortions. This is reimbursement for basic healthcare services. And yeah, look, it was a hard vote, an incredible, hardest vote I've ever taken, without a doubt.
Okay,
but
so
the
if
Constitution
you are
says
governor,
my job is to
Chris,
take care of my constituents, and that's what I'm going to do every
If you
time.
get to be governor, are you going to continue to solicit other medical outfits
Absolutely.
to come forth and bid on these
So
contracts?
we're going to do two things. We're going to keep working hard to find other alternatives, but more importantly, we're also going to simplify the process. One of the arguments I also heard when talking to some of these smaller healthcare facilities is that they didn't have the staff, the legal teams, the grant writers to go through the very convoluted and complex process that we've created in this state to bid on such contracts. It's a very hard process. So, and I'm very sensitive to that. We want to make sure that we are making it easy for everyone to participate. So, again, having a governor that simplifies that process, that solicits other options, that's one of the best things that we can do, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Any follow-up, Mr. Tui? Or
Yes,
Mrs.
Councilor, you said last year during the height of this controversy, there was talk about an investigation and Governor Hassan said no. Do you think there still should be an investigation of Planned Parenthood of Northern New England?
I think that's something that we could look at. I mean, given that all the other states have debunked theirs, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think we could look at that. And to be very blunt about it, I think there were some folks even within those organizations that said, yeah, have the investigation. Let's put it out on the table. Let's just see what is going on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if we want to go down that path, that's surely something that we should definitely look at. Yeah.
Sticking with the health question, the opiate crisis is still raging in the state. We're on pace
Absolutely.
to have possibly a record number of OD deaths. How would you support addressing this crisis?
There's a lot of ways. First of all, you bring up a great point. This is an out-of-control crisis. We're on pace for another record year. Have we had some programs in the state that have started, done some good? Of course. But one of the things I've taken criticism for is my insistence that we keep fighting. We've had no state leadership, and I got criticized, but I'll say it again. We've had very little, I should say, local leadership in really attacking this issue. We have had too many elected officials that want to rest on their laurels on a couple programs. A couple programs is great, but we are losing this war on drugs. And I'm going to keep fighting on it. I want aggressive prevention in schools. I have a 5th grader that was part of the DARE program this year in our public schools. They talked about smoking and a little bit on drinking. They didn't address pills. They didn't address gateway drugs. They didn't address heroin. And my son will likely be offered pills or drugs or marijuana in the next 3 years. And that's a hard fact. That is a hard fact to accept as a parent. So I want very aggressive prevention programs in schools that also brings the parents and the caregivers into those programs so they can understand what are the warning signs, what tools and resources do they have, right? Just telling the kids just say no and sending them home, that's not enough anymore. I want a program that provides, really breaks down those roadblocks to recovery. We need more beds in this state, and we need to provide a system that incentivizes the right workers to maintain those beds, those recovery clinicians, the psychiatrists, the clinical workers. We're losing that younger workforce in droves in this state because we haven't had a governor that knows how to incentivize a young workforce to stay here. Finally, the next step would be providing I've sat in these recovery centers and I've talked to these people, and not for 5 or 10 minutes, it's for hours. Sometimes you have to sit there for hours and really talk to them. How did they get here? What was it? Was it pills? Was it undiagnosed mental illness? Was it, what led them into this path? The biggest thing that I hear is, I sat with a young woman. She was about 24 years old, and her 3-year-old was being taken care of by her mom. She had a criminal record. She had stolen from her friends. She had no job. And she said to me, Mr. Sununu, in about 8 days I'm out of this program. But I understand that in 6 months it's very likely I'm either back here or I'm dead. It tears your heart out when you hear stories like that. We're getting kids through some of these recovery programs, and that's well and good, but we're doing nothing to get them back into the workforce, to give them self-worth, to make them viable sectors of the community. My program gives business tax credits for businesses who invest in job training programs on the back end of recovery, so that there is a gateway and a pathway to work them back into the workforce. Finally, we can go on to a lot of different aspects of my opioid plan, but law enforcement. We have to make sure law enforcement has the tools and resources. They're on the front lines. They're risking their lives every day. They do an incredible job. Operation Granite Hammer we increased the funding this year. That was a great first step. We just have to never let up on that. And we have to make sure they have the time and resources. And given the climate right now, the fact that law enforcement agencies are having so much difficulty recruiting and bringing folks in, we have to get behind them 100%. I will never stop fighting, and I'll never stop having the back of police officers. They're on the front lines of this, and they need to make sure that the elected officials in the state, especially at the top, have their back every time.
Wow. There's a lot there.
Sure. Well, it's a big issue. It's the biggest crisis in the state.
One of the things you said was the governor incentivizing young workers to stay in New Hampshire.
Sure.
And then you broaden that to include police officers. What role has the governor and the government in incentivizing young workers to stay in New Hampshire?
So I think we need to create, by having a governor that understands business, and not just 20 years ago, but is actually in the business world today. I have 800 employees at Waterville Valley. I'm dealing with the issues that business owners and business managers deal with every day, whether you're talking about high healthcare costs, our lack of energy, long-term energy policy, which has created very high costs for us there, the business taxes, the overregulation. I'm dealing with those on a day-to-day basis in today's world. I have trouble hiring folks. There's no doubt about it. Up in the North Country, we have trouble bringing in younger folks. But we're doing those interviews. We're talking to people, and I have a great understanding. My team has a great understanding of why they're coming here and what's really preventing them. An example of my plan. We always have the university that's looking for more money. Right? We have a younger workforce that's leaving. We have what I call high-risk jobs that we cannot fill, like teachers or nurses or clinicians. So my program kind of addresses all three. We're going to take some money out of resource and economic development, which, again, economic development in the state has been stagnant. The department hasn't done much of anything, if you ask me. I think that department has to report directly to the governor, first off. But we're going to take some of the money in that department and put it aside in a fund. And as for those who go to the universities of New Hampshire, graduate with our incredibly high debt load. We know we have some of the highest debt load of anyone in the country as our students graduate. If you stay and work in one of those high-risk job areas, we're going to help pay down your student debt. Right? Let's create programs to incentivize them. Let's promote our university system as a workforce incubator, as a workforce generator, because that's exactly what it is. And when you promote it the right way, you're letting the businesses outside of New Hampshire know that you value your younger workforce. We're going to have a viable workforce here in the long, not just the short term, but the long term. And you're much more likely to incentivize them to come over the border.
Are you going to be then rewarding the university system of New Hampshire for hiking costs and tuition in far in excess of inflation rates by paying down the debt of certain workers who stay here?
No, absolutely not. I'm going to reward the students. I'm going to reward the students for staying here.
How are you going to address, or do you not care to address, the incredible rate of cost increases in the university system of New Hampshire?
There's no doubt that we have large cost increases in the university system. That's obvious.
And to what do you ascribe these costs?
So let's address a couple things first. The overhead, the cost per student that we pay on the administrative and overhead basis is actually quite low compared to the rest of the states. We have a fairly efficient system in terms of the overhead cost per student. Some of the costs that I see over there, we're investing a lot into facilities. where I think we could be cutting back a little bit and being much more, I don't want to say frugal, but smarter about how we spend those dollars. We have the platinum standard buildings everywhere you look, but that's adding millions of dollars of cost onto some of these facilities when you can have beautiful buildings with all the requirements and everything you need for modern day technology and all the pieces that it takes to provide a modern education without going to the levels that we do. So we do have to be smarter about how we spend those dollars, of course.
Stop the funding on buildings already under construction?
No, no, I'm not proposing to stopping the funding buildings under construction. That isn't necessarily a smart thing. I mean, if there's egregious spending going on, or we can look at those individual projects. We have to be smart about it, of course. But I look to someone like former DOT Commissioner Chris Clement, who went over to Durham. To University of New Hampshire in Durham, and he brings I think a great sense. He just went over there about a year and a half ago. A great sense of lean management, right? How do we get the most out of our dollars and out of our people in the most efficient way possible, creating a positive system? Having folks like that enter the university system or public service, that is a great way to start bringing kind of that private sector real world experience into what we need into our public institutions.
Chris, you said that the overhead and administration costs at the University System of New Hampshire are in line with or a little lower than?
If you look at it as from a cost per student basis.
Cost per student basis.
Yeah.
Isn't this the same argument that every UNH administration and every professors group says why you have to raise our salaries when you raise anybody else's salaries so that we can keep pace? When you say that UNH is keeping pace or a little lower on a dollar per student basis, aren't you just saying that you are okay with the cost levels at the University of New Hampshire?
No, not at all. What I'm saying, and you're relating it to salaries. I don't think so at all. My program is very clear. I want to help the students. I want to help the individuals, because ultimately that helps the businesses and the communities in the state. That's where the money needs to go.
But how do you help the students and the taxpayers of New Hampshire by telling our readership that you are going to incentivize young people in certain job areas to stay here by helping to pay down their debt at the University of New Hampshire, which is spending at the same level as all other universities in this country, which is crazy, wacko, 20% above any normal inflation factor, et cetera. Do you ever talk to your dad about this?
No, I don't talk to my father about the university system, no.
He would be a good one to talk to.
Well, so what's the question? I don't want to miss your question.
My question is, and I think you've answered it. My question was, are you concerned about the increasing costs at the University of New Hampshire? And your answer is, you're going to find a way to help pay down the debt of the kids who go there.
Those are the kids that come out. My program looks at the kids as they come out of the university system. It isn't about putting money into the university system. It's helping those that come out and incentivizing them to stay into New Hampshire as part of our workforce. These are the programs that we need.
If a kid is going to go to the university system of New Hampshire, knowing that Governor Sununu is going to help pay his debt on the back end, then he is likely to pay the price that UNH is charging him. So when you say you're not
and that's an investment in our workforce, and that's what we need to do. No governor has made a true investment in our younger workforce here in way too long. And what is the result? We haven't been able to bring a single major business into this state in years. That's what I'm worried about. You have to understand the pushes and pulls of business today to drive a younger workforce, because these are the variables that businesses are looking at. The GEs of the world who we could have brought over here but didn't. The other major businesses. And my plan says in the first 100 days, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to visit businesses all outside of New Hampshire, hopefully in our region, and I'm going to recruit them into New Hampshire because I understand the variables they're looking at. And this program is a direct result of conversations I've had with those businesses that says your government is not investing in your workforce. You have an opioid crisis that is out of control. And so if a business wants to come into this state, they're looking at it not in the next 2 years like too many legislators and elected officials do, but they're looking 10 and 20 years down the road. We need to have business leadership in that corner office that has a long-term vision to achieve our long-term goals. But we need to take action today, now, and it only happens with someone who is in the business world today, who understands the variables, who are dealing with these issues in today's world, to bring that kind of experience. And I think what I bring to the table is unmatched by any other candidate in this race.
Chris, how many of your 800 employees are college graduates in Waterville?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know how many are college graduates. We have part-time, we have full-time, we have
Really?
year-round, we have stipend.
But
Yeah. I mean, for example, I have over 200 ski instructors. For example, I couldn't tell you exactly how many. We have all ages, we have seniors, we have kids that are still in school. So I wouldn't be comfortable giving a firm number on that.
Okay, North Country? You
North Country.
referenced the North Country?
I'm sorry?
You referenced the North Country.
Well, my business is in the North Country, yes.
It is?
Waterville Valley Resort?
Yeah, that's the North Country?
Yes, it's the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
The North Country, another governor accurately described, this was a guy named Sherman Adams, whose ski facility was a bit north of yours. The North Country starts at the Great Notches, not in Plymouth or Waterville Valley.
Well, my business is in the mountains of New Hampshire. I don't want to. I don't
feel
want to
like
get hung up on
James
semantics,
Pindell
but
asking Scott Brown.
yeah, look. My business is in the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
That's
It's in the North Country.
All right, we have that cleared up. That's the lead, Bowie.
Let's go back to the opioid crisis for a moment.
Sure.
The state attorney general is investigating the pharmaceutical companies to see if there was any wrongdoing. If you were governor, would you continue that investigation?
No. You know, and I'll tell you why. We need to look at. I don't mind an investigation. I don't mind looking into their practices. Part of my program is making sure there's transparency between what the pharmaceutical companies tell doctors in terms of the risks, the prescription recommendations and whatnot for these drugs. We need to make that very transparent so individuals can have all the same information that doctors are getting from the pharmaceutical companies. So let's start there. The reason I have a problem with the governor's approach to this investigation is that it's a little bit of an ambulance chasing scheme. This is a large company that has come in, solicited the state of New Hampshire. It's a money grab to pharmaceutical companies. It's demonizing them. I don't believe in demonizing pharmaceutical companies. I believe in holding the few that do make these opioids transparent and accountable. And if there are, misrepresentations or poor marketing practices that have led to some of this crisis, of course we have to go after that. The issue I have with the way the governor is doing it, they're painting this giant broad stroke to hopefully collect hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a money grab. It's not really being done for the right reasons, and I don't think it has the right focus. So I believe we probably need to do an investigation. I believe we need to hold people accountable. The governor's approach to it is just, it's very different than my approach to it. I think we need to be much more calculated and specific about what we're going after, why we're doing it. At the end of the day, this is about people. This is about making sure individuals, patients, families have all the right information and access to that information, and that information can be verified and held accountable to those who are presenting it.
If you were governor, would you let members of the New Hampshire National Guard carry weapons at their training and not training but recruiting facilities?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think
If as determined by the Guard, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're saying if the Guard wanted?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You would allow it?
Of course.
Do you think that the students in Croydon, a very small town, should be able to use taxpayer dollars to go to Montessori school in a neighboring town?
Absolutely. One of the reasons I got involved in the governor's race was because of education. I think we need to scrap Common Core. End of story. All the other candidates can say whatever they want. Common Core has to go. And I say that because I'm a parent. Not because I read some sort of talking points on a piece of paper. I'm a parent. I'm a dad. My daughter and son are in those classrooms, and I've sat in those classrooms, and I've seen how we hold teachers back from doing what they do best. Teachers are so pushed down by the administrations. I call it the invisible handcuffs we've put on them because they have all these other constraints, really driven by Washington, D.C., that limit school choice, that limit the ability for a teacher to have their own choice in a classroom and driving quality curriculum. I've seen it. I've been in those classrooms. And the second big issue after we scrap Common Core is ensuring school choice for everyone. And I don't care where you want your son or daughter to go to school, public, private, Montessori, charter, Catholic school, it doesn't matter. You, the parent, have the ultimate say in where your child should go to school. And when you have 4 or 5 families in Croydon, as you've referenced, and I've been championing this since day one, where the administration said okay, where the teachers said okay, where the parents made that choice. It was even going to save them money, for goodness sakes. And the governor's response in this state was to send her attorney general after that small town and sue them. That is not leadership. That is not problem solving. That is not finding a viable solution. That is just throwing a hammer down on these poor families that are simply trying to provide the best pathway of education for their children. I've homeschooled. I had my kids on a wait list in a charter school. We were hoping to get in. We were waitlisted. My kids are in public school now, last year. So if there's anyone who understands the dynamics of school choice in the state, and frankly, the limitations that this governor and her administration, through the Board of Education, through the Department of Education, have put on families, it's me. Again, I'm living these issues. It's about having a governor that is a stakeholder in these things, that understands them from a first-order perspective. And Croydon, absolutely has to be championed as an example of where we can't let this happen again. We can't let a governor and an administration come down on individuals because they're making the best choices for their kids. That's unconscionable to me.
Well, they say the governor and her administration, but didn't the court just uphold the governor's position?
And I disagree with the court.
And if the courts continue to uphold that, what would you do?
Then as a governor, we find that legislation to allow, the whole point is putting forth the legislation that allows these freedoms, that creates a program where families do have options with how they're going to use those public dollars. Those are taxpayer dollars. That's their money, right? It's our money. It's not the government's money, it's the people's money. And so how we spend that should be done on a local basis. It's all about local control. And virtually in no other area in the state, healthcare comes close, but I believe in no other area than as much as education does Washington, D.C. have their claws in us, where they have completely eroded the value of local control. I say it as a parent, I say it who's someone who's working with school districts, who's someone who's sitting in these classrooms. Washington has completely dictated what is going on when our kids sit at those desks every day. That has to be pushed back on. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to kick Washington out of here. And when we do it our way, we do it better than everybody else. And that's the value I'm going to bring back to the corner office.
Is there like a playbook for politicians that when a question is asked, there was a certain time where the politician in his response just keeps going and going and going?
No, look, I'm very passionate about this. I'm incredibly passionate. Business and education and opioids. Those are the three things I talk about. Those are the three things that really need leadership in this state. And I do get passionate, not because, again, I'm a politician, I'm just reading off a piece of paper. I'm passionate about these issues because I am living them every single day, whether it's my business, my family, my community. That's what this is about, having a stakeholder, a governor and a government that actually lives and plays by the same rules as everybody else.
Are you satisfied with the current way that education is funded in New Hampshire? Do you see that in the right direction, stable, in the wrong direction?
I believe we need a constitutional amendment that returns the power of funding back to the legislature. We got close to it, maybe 2008, 2009. Even Governor Lynch was in favor of it. He couldn't get the votes from his own Democrats in the legislature, and we seem to have all of a sudden forgotten about it, right? But the courts are still, with their formulas, are still dictating how education funding is dispersed throughout the state. We need a constitutional amendment that fixes that and returns the power where it belongs, the legislature, because they're the best representation of the people.
Okay. You referenced being criticized for your position that there was not leadership at the state level and for the most part at the local level in addressing the drug crisis. You then acknowledged that you were speaking about the political leadership.
Sure.
Not the, let's say, police or health leadership.
No, of course not. The law enforcement and first responders and the police and the firemen, they're on the front lines of this every single day. There's no criticism of them there. They need more resources.
I'm trying to help you out here because,
okay.
Again, in discussing it, you did not use that qualifier. You just said lack of leadership. But
sure.
You meant, and
of
I
course.
think most people understood, except for your opponents, that you were speaking of the political leadership.
Oh, they understood it as well, but they're going to twist things any way they want.
To you, well, there was a local police chief who took to his official and his department's Twitter account to take great offense. I don't know what term he used for how stupid you were, but do you think that it's a police department or a police chief's role to be involved in politics?
Of course not. Oh, absolutely not. And while the comment was directed at me, I don't respond to things like that. But being asked a direct question, I'll tell you, it was completely inappropriate for that chief. And I understand, he's friends with my opponent. He wants to be politically supportive and all that. But that is not the role of law enforcement. And again, I've worked with law enforcement. I've championed them. We held our coffee with a cop up in Waterville. We did another one down in Newfields. Again, trying to get people to talk and understand what these folks are doing. These men and women that are on the front lines of this every single day. And what we've seen nationally really has a direct effect. I mean, the horrors of what happened down in Texas. But it has a direct effect on what's happening to us here with our inability to recruit. The fact that my fear is that there is a culture, I don't want to go so far as to say of disrespect, but of apathy towards those who are putting themselves on the line for us every single day. And just the implication that I would ever be critical of that is ridiculous.
Chris, do you think that police chiefs should be appearing in political ads for specific politicians? In support or opposition to somebody's election?
In their uniform. In uniform.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do believe in an individual's a right to say what he wants. Whether it's if that chief who made those comments, is it his right to say that? Sure, it's his right to. We all have our right to free speech, to have our opinions. Is it his place in the public format to do that? I just think it was inappropriate. So should they be allowed to do it? Yes. Is it always appropriate? No.
Well, okay, I'll rephrase the question. Yeah. Is it appropriate for a police chief in uniform to be appearing in TV commercials supporting a particular candidate for election?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much. You mentioned DARE.
Yes.
I didn't know DARE was still around.
It is.
Okay. How much has DARE cost, and what are the effective results been? If we have this current crisis, we've had drug crises right along, so the DARE program, for whatever amount of money it's cost, has it been worth it?
So let's do a little history. DARE was virtually unfunded for a few years, and that's why you and I even thought it had disappeared completely. We put a little more money into it in the state this year. I got to be honest, I couldn't tell you exactly how much, but I know that the legislature increased the funding, and I was happy to see that. A, it's not nearly enough. B, it's not nearly aggressive enough in terms of its programming. That's where I have the issue with DARE. My program looks at in the 5th grade, we need to start talking about heroin. We need to start talking about opioids, and we need to start getting real about the facts of life here. And it's hard as parents to have those conversations, but we have to start having them. If we don't get to our kids before the drug dealers do, we're in trouble. They're going to get them. They're going to get to my son, and they're going to get to my daughter. And it is my job, and I hope this, with the school's help and the information that we can provide, that they're making the best decisions and hopefully the right decisions for themselves. But we cannot be blind to this. We cannot think, oh, this is just about alcohol and smoking in the 5th grade. That is antiquated thinking. That is old school thinking. We have to be aggressive, and that's not the only way, but one of the best ways that we can start addressing this issue in the long haul. We need better education.
Speaking of facts of life in schools and governors, do you favor, would you oppose, would you switch the executive order given by the current governor relative to transgender bathroom and other use in the state?
This transgender issue really started out of Washington, D.C., with a president that once again wants to just impose his edicts and rules on everybody in the country, with no care for local control. When it comes to the transgender bathroom issue, I believe local communities should be making those decisions. If a school district really wants to create a rule for their schools, that is their choice. It's not up to the federal government, and it is not up to the state to be making those decisions. I believe in local control.
Well, what is your understanding and view of the transgender issue in public schools at, for instance, the elementary or junior high level? Is that something that is okay with you to be addressing it as part of the, if not curriculum, then policy rules in the classroom, that 5th graders, for instance, your son or daughter, should understand and be addressed that Susie is now Sal, and he's going to use, with the school board support, your bathroom rather than his own.
It clearly shouldn't be a priority as part of our curriculum. But again, if you're talking about the actual rules within, who uses the restrooms and whatnot, I'll leave that up to the locals to decide. And that way the parents have input, the school board has input, the elected folks down there have input, the teachers have input. And that's where the input really needs to be making sure we're making the best decisions for those families and kids.
The terrorism is on everyone's mind, obviously. And the federal government has notified New Hampshire that we're going to be getting about 600 refugees in the next fiscal year, including some from places where terrorism is a major issue. Are you okay with 600 refugees coming to New Hampshire? And if so, what would you do as governor to make sure that people in New Hampshire are safe?
Yeah, the quick answer is no, I'm not. We have accepted refugees in the past. It's a program where we'll get 100 or so a year. This was back when I first joined the council in 11, 12. And I've been involved in this because we've approved the contracts to provide the funding, the local funding for some of those support services. When President Obama tried to say that we're going to take 10,000 Syrian refugees during the Middle East crisis, and we're still in a Middle East crisis, last year, I was one of the first ones to stand up and say, no, we should not be accepting that. The federal government has not and continues to be lack on their ability to properly vet who is coming into this country. And we've seen the results in Europe. You have the European countries who wanted to have basically these open borders, and now there's a crisis over there, an absolute crisis, and they're trying to find every which way to shut those borders down. The fact is that the times have changed. We have a whole different world, and that if we're taking these refugees in, if the federal government can show clearly and concisely who these folks are, what their background is, what their intentions are, why they're here, and do the full background check, that's a different story. To date, they cannot do that. And therefore, I think we need to put a pause on the program, especially from those countries of highest risk.
Sure. Well, what's the role of the governor? I understand the governor has said that there's only so much she can do because it's a federal issue.
Unfortunately, that is true. Technically, the State Department sends us who they're going to send us. The governor really has very little ability to say no. They literally put them on the plane, they send the funds. Even if we reject the funds, the individuals are still here. It was only when you had governors en masse, and Republican governors, mind you, en masse, standing up and saying, no, we are going to push back on this entire program. And with that effort, when the governors worked in unison on that effort, they were able to get results. That's the only way it's going to happen. You have good, if I can remind everyone, 31, I believe, maybe 32, 31 Republican governors in this country. Good conservative fiscal ideals, standing strong, understanding the issues of national security, and making sure that the people in their state, their constituents, are taken care of. That's what we need, and that's exactly the attitude I'm going to bring to the governor's office.
Chris.
Yes.
The candidate for your party's presidential nomination is in the fine state of Maine today. When you get the nomination of your party to be governor, will you be inviting Donald Trump to campaign here?
No, I will not be inviting Donald Trump to campaign. Look, my race is about me. It's about the governor. It's about this state. So no, I've said I will vote for him and I'll support him. But I'm focused.
Despite what he's done in the past couple of weeks?
Look, I don't like a lot of what he said. I think a lot of his statements have been disgusting, have been inappropriate. I've said that all along.
Is there any line that he can cross where you would not support him?
Well, I think there's a line for everybody. I mean, we'll have to see what that is, of course. I mean, but of course, there's a line for everybody in terms of support. For me right now, the alternative being Hillary Clinton would be a disaster for this country, a disaster for families, a disaster for individuals, and a disaster for business.
So it's the lesser of two evils? Is that what it is?
I won't vote for the evil on the other side of the ticket, I'll tell you that.
For the evil on our side of the ticket. That's the answer. Mr. Toohey.
Back to business. You support right to work. When you travel the state, do you hear businesses and constituents say they want this, they need this for the economy?
I've heard when it comes to right to work, for me, it's more of some of the private businesses that I've spoken to out of our state who are hesitant to come in because the fact that we don't have right to work. That's really the issue for me. I want to make sure that we are open to business for everyone to come across this border, because we've had I wouldn't say a little luck, because that implies that we've even tried. We haven't even had governors that have truly tried and understood what it takes to bring a business across the borders. My main job as governor is really to say we are open for business, we're going to be inviting, we're going to lower our business taxes, lower our regulations, make healthcare more competitive in cost, and really do those things that are important to businesses to make sure that they know when they come across here they're going to have a representative government that has their backs every time and understands their needs so we can grow and thrive our economy, which ultimately affects everything else in our communities.
What percentage of the New Hampshire private workforce is unionized?
I believe it's very small right now. It's actually very small.
So why would right to work be an issue with anybody from out of state?
Some of the larger businesses I've talked to just are hesitant to come in, given if they have existing union shops or whatever it might be with the rest of their businesses out of state. They've implied a hesitation to come in. I mean, I can't speak to the level of detail on their end.
They have union shops elsewhere, and they won't come to New Hampshire, which has a very small percentage of unionized people. Try to.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I misspoke. They don't have union shops. They don't want to create. They have a business model that doesn't work with that structure. So it's something that they're hesitant to come into.
Well, is New Hampshire known for its brand of being a big union state?
No, I don't think so at all. No, I don't think so at all. But I can only kind of. It's the feedback I'm getting when I've talked to some of these businesses I would love to attract over the border, but that are simply hesitant. It's about economic development. It's about driving business. It's about driving the economy. It's about getting out of the stagnation that we have here. And you only do that by encouraging a workforce to grow and thrive here, by encouraging new businesses to come over the border, like we used to do. We used to bring 4 or 5 businesses a year over that had 2, 3, 4, however many employees, hundreds of employees. We just don't do it anymore. And who is doing it? Those 31 Republican governors, good conservative governors that have business sense, that understand what drives business. That's the new world of competition. And just to the south of us, God bless, Charlie Baker's doing a great job down in Massachusetts, even in a tough political atmosphere, breaking down barriers, reducing regulation, and again, creating an atmosphere of business competition that we simply aren't keeping up with.
Reducing regulation, didn't he just sign yesterday an equal pay for equal work law, which requires employees not to ask of the prospective employee what they earned at their previous place of employment?
I did see that he signed that law, but look, any good elected official understands you can't just go in with a sledgehammer and get everything you want. And we've had too many elected officials that try that on both sides of the aisle. That isn't how you get things done. There's compromise, there's working together, there's understanding the economic dynamics and the social and community dynamics within your individual states. Governor Baker, this isn't about Governor Baker, but Governor Baker has to deal with the dynamics of Boston, right? The dynamics of a very dynamic state, east and west, geographically, economically. So I don't want to, I'm not going to tell you why or why not Governor Baker might have signed a piece of legislation. My focus is on the people of New Hampshire, what our dynamics are.
31 great conservative governors.
They've created a competitive atmosphere, to be sure.
How do you define economic stagnation in a state where we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country?
Unemployment is defined by those looking for a job and can't find it. We have wage stagnation. We have an atmosphere now where we have so many of our workforce is being kept to 29 hours or less because of Obamacare. We have a lot of our workforce that, because of Obama's new rule, not legislative, that enforces so many more people to be hourly instead of salaried employees, that there's no more flexibility with employers to allow them to work beyond 40 hours. So in a business like mine, where in the winter we're all working 60, 80 hours a week, and then we take some time off in the spring, we work hard in the summer, we take some time off in the fall. It's our dynamic, it's how we work, it's how everyone enjoys the business that we thrive in. I can't do that anymore with the number of employees I have. I need to hire more employees. I need 2 employees to do the job of 1 now. Because you have elected officials in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere that don't understand the dynamics of how business works. I was talking to Ms. Hatch, who runs the National Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and we're talking about this very issue, that we have too many elected officials right now who truly don't understand what is going on in the business world and why we have become stagnated. So low unemployment, that's an antiquated way of looking at your economy. That is, the fact of the matter is we lost population in the state a couple years ago. We're barely maintaining the 1.3 million people we have today. We're losing our younger workforce. We're not attracting more business in here. Trust me, we are stagnated at best.
So the Department of Labor in Concord is aware of the number of people that you have working 60 to 80 hours a week in the wintertime?
Well, I imagine so. We report everything to the Department of Labor.
And
Sure.
do they get overtime over 40 hours?
If they require, we follow the laws very, very strictly. And I can tell you, it costs us a lot of money. It'll cost my business well over $100,000, or I won't go into the exact number, but it's well over $100,000 this year just because of this new administrative rule coming out of the Obama administration. We follow the laws very carefully, but I can tell you, because we do, and I believe most of the businesses of the state do, I understand the pressures that these businesses are under. And that is whether you're a small business or a large business or a mid-sized business. We are all feeling the impacts. And for those that are here in Manchester, please come to the North Country. Come north of the North Country if you want. The economy is very different up there. We are feeling a lot of pains. We had a very tough winter. There's a lack of capital, a lack of development and construction because folks simply don't have the economic flexibility to grow their businesses like they did before. You need a governor in this state that doesn't understand a city, that doesn't understand just the seacoast, that really has a true regional perspective. We're a small state, but we're very diverse. Seacoast is very different than the West. The North is very different than Manchester and Salem. I bring all of that perspective to the governor's office for the first time in decades, frankly, to make sure that whatever we do in Concord is being done with the understanding of how it's going to affect the individuals all across the state.
Dollars are fungible, and so is electricity. And I'll get back to it.
Sure.
We have a question.
We have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Great.
And I'll just caveat with this. I Googled the guy, and this might be one of the people who follows you around that we were talking about before the... but it's something you might want to talk about. So this is Isaac Walker, and he asks, as governor, would you sign a bill similar to the one signed in Indiana that would allow businesses to consider their religious beliefs when considering whether or not to serve someone?
I can't. I don't want to comment directly on what was signed in Indiana. Look,
I think he's mischaracterizing what was signed.
I believe so too. So I'm a little confused by the question, to be honest, because I don't want to mischaracterize my answer, if I might. So, as a governor, will I sign a bill that allows a business to consider religious beliefs?
Religious beliefs.
Look, private businesses have the right to refuse service to anyone they want. We have to make sure we do not discriminate. I mean, there are very clear discrimination laws in this state, and I think we do those laws actually very well. So it's making sure that the businesses are following the discrimination laws of the state, but also making sure that any business can refuse service to folks on the basis beyond discrimination or exactly what have to be held. Look, I have my business, and we have to, I make sure the exact same thing. There are laws that have to be followed, and there are rules, and making sure we don't discriminate is of utmost concern, of course.
Dollars are fungible. Electricity is fungible. New Hampshire, you mentioned, has a concern about the high cost of energy. Where you be on Northern Pass?
Look, I am one of the highest energy users in the state. 2 years ago, just to make snow over a period of 3 months, I spent over $1.2 million just on electricity. So when we see manufacturers walking out of this state, not because they don't love New Hampshire, but because it just doesn't make business sense anymore to be here, because they have to look at the long-term implications of the fact that we don't have a long-term energy policy. I understand it. I am living those issues. I buy my power on the spot market every 5 minutes. I have an app on my phone where I watch the market. I understand the dynamics of how it works. Northern Pass is going to happen, and I believe it should. Will the plan change a little bit here and there as it goes through the site evaluation committee? Yeah, sure. And we have to make sure it's done with local input, which I think I give Eversource credit after they took control of the project from Hydro-Quebec in terms of driving a better understanding of what was needed. I think they've done a good job reaching out to a lot of the communities. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be on board, but we need base load generation in New England. There's no doubt about it. And New Hampshire needs to be able to capitalize on it.
The state in Concord has heated its buildings for years with steam generated from local wood growers. And the state has now chucked that in favor of natural gas and is going to spend $15 million or more to retrofit its buildings. Were you aware of that, and what was wrong with discontinuing?
Very timely question. So this was brought up yesterday with I spoke with the Commissioner of Administrative Services. Concord Steam was sold, Liberty, I believe, bought Concord Steam. So
Concord Steam was sold because the state was going to change from steam to natural gas. The people who run Concord Steam said they were perfectly happy to continue to run the company and supply to the state. But so when you say it was sold, that's because of the state's.
well, over time there was a
decision.
plan to modernize, bring the boilers up to speed, and actually get I believe they actually even put in natural gas lines, if I'm not mistaken, in downtown Concord. I think during some of in the rebuild they did, if I'm not mistaken. So the problem that the state is now going to have is this process is going to be extremely accelerated. Instead of over 3 or 5 or 10 years of solely, turning over to natural gas, it's all going to have to happen pretty much in the next 18 months. That's going to put a big financial constraint. I talked directly with the commissioner about it yesterday, and we're trying to, and they're trying to figure a way out of it. But basically, not to be able to do it, but where the money will come from, how it will be done. I'm a little concerned that the state is going to get involved with managing Concord Steam in the short term, which could be very, very costly. I don't think anyone wants to do that. But physically, even if you had the money, it would be very hard to turn all these. I think there's 25 state buildings plus the downtown. They'll have to take care of themselves in the private sector. But we have 25 state buildings minimum that will have to be transformed over in the next 18 months. That's a very difficult task and will likely cost the state a substantial amount of money. So what I'm seeing going forward is we're going to have to kind of, I think, have to reprioritize where those dollars are coming from, what projects are going to have to take a back seat. In some buildings it'll be a lot easier than others, but in some buildings we're going to have a challenge, and yeah, we're faced with it.
Well,
Sure.
would Governor Sununu be aware of possible unintended consequences and have done something different than the current administration and how they?
No,
made this
I
change?
think modernizing those buildings into a natural gas system was the right plan and the right approach. Concord Steam sold themselves, and so that's
But
their
as I
choice to
say,
do.
Concord
The state
Steam-
doesn't own Concord Steam. We just own the lines.
Concord Steam sold itself because of the state's plan. So in the state, in planning this, apparently didn't guess that perhaps Concord Steam would sell
No, I
quicker
think
than the state.
I would disagree. I think we knew that was a risk, but you can't say we're not going to modernize our systems and think for the future and think long term and create a plan to modernize your system in the fear that this might happen. Otherwise, you'll never make progress. You'll never adapt your buildings. You'll never be more modern and hopefully create a system that reduces your long-term costs. So that was a risk and a repercussion, and it's something that we're going to have to deal with. But yeah. We tried, not to belay the issue on Concord Steam, we tried about 4 years ago, thereabouts, to get a long-term contract with Concord Steam on rates that very likely would have prevented this from happening for quite some time. For a variety of reasons, that deal fell through. We worked on the council a little bit, but ultimately it fell through, whether it was because of the financing or the deal between Concord Steam and the other private businesses there. But look, the state has to modernize. It's unfortunate that we're going to have to do it pretty darn quickly, but we're now looking at our options to see how best to make that transition.
Well, modernize, where are you going with natural gas? Why don't you have a bunch of solar things on the roofs?
Well,
Isn't that more modern?
more modern and more costly, drastically more costly, so I mean, is that something that the state? I'd be interested to see if Administrative Services comes back with that plan. I guess they could. Maybe they'll. If that's your recommendation, I guess I can bring that to them. I don't know.
You referenced that the Commissioner of DRED should be reporting directly to the governor?
No, the Department of Economic Development, which is currently within the Department of Resource and Economic Development,
Yes.
I believe should be reporting directly to the governor for a variety of reasons. Right now, for those who don't know, the Department of DRED, as we call it, it's an unfortunate name, has parks.
Why is it unfortunate? Should it be changed?
It sounds dread. It's negative. We don't want to be. It's a marketing thing, I guess. But look, that department has parks, forestry, and economic development. One of these things doesn't belong. And economic development has been stagnated in this state right now. We haven't put the effort. I would break that out, have it report directly to the governor with its own budget, very clear, because the governor has to champion in that. And then you can have parks and forestry over in its own department. But when you put too much into the pot that doesn't all sync together, you lose focus. And that's exactly what's happened with that department.
Cannon and Sunapee being in the ski business, should they be owned by the state or should they be sold?
they're competitors. I recuse myself on all contracts. No, I do. I take a careful job recusing myself on contracts. Having
Well,
to do
if you're
with Canaan and
governor, are
Sunapee.
you going to do the same?
As governor, I will no longer have a direct interest in Waterville Valley, and I can comment on it. But you have to understand, I'm running Waterville Valley, and I'm running as a candidate. As governor, we can start talking about that. But I still have a direct interest, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about that at this
But
point.
you would bring your perspective and your expertise
Oh,
on
sure.
the subject to
Oh,
the-
absolutely,
to the
absolutely.
Congress.
I think one of the things that we have to do is you have to listen to whether it's the ski industry or the surrounding businesses or those who have an interest at Cannon or whatever it is. I will say this, Sunapee's done a very good job under private ownership. There's no denying that. They've grown, they've thrived. They've done a great job over there. And sure, they're a big competitor of mine, but let's give credit where credit is due.
Would you raffle off the low-digit license plates to make money for the state?
No, I would not be raffling off any low-digit license plates.
Chris, where are you now in terms of the Medicaid expansion? Do you support this?
I would have liked, given what the legislature passed in this most recent version of Medicaid expansion, I would have liked to seen a work requirement in there. My original idea, as they were trying to formulate the legislation, was to create a plan that kind of grandfathered people out of the system. So as people went from expanded Medicaid back onto private plans, they got back into the workforce, whatever it was, they couldn't necessarily come back in, and we got the eligibility requirements more in line to, I think, where they should be. I mean, we've increased Medicaid rolls in this state by 80%. Democrats treat that like that's a good thing. That's not a good thing. I can't think of a worse metric, frankly, than the fact that we've increased the number of people relying on government services for something as critical as health care by 80%. That's not a good sign for the state. So I want to get people more back on private roles. You do that by increasing competition within the private market, which right now we don't have very good competition, and frankly, we're losing it every time we expand these giant Washington programs. I mean, every time we push forward Obamacare, which I believe needs to be repealed, every time we push forward a Medicaid program of the expanse that we have in this state, we're encouraging those on private commercial health insurance to go into the public market. How is that incentivizing a new health insurance competitor to come into the state? That fundamentally is breaking down the competition that we desperately need here. And I say that again as a business owner who's dealing with this day in and day out, making sure that I can provide a quality health care plan for my employees, but also facing the pressures and challenges. So I didn't mean to get off the question of Medicaid, but Medicaid. Sorry.
Just to clarify, you do support Medicaid expansion. You just wish there was a...
I would have liked to have seen the work requirement in it. Given the health crisis we have in the state, the number of folks that I've seen in these recovery centers, yes, I probably would have ended up supporting it in its form. But again, we do everything in the state in 2-year chunks. This is my frustration with Medicaid expansion. We take it every 2 years so elected officials can get to their next election. Let's have a long-term plan in the state with some vision, with some goals, with some understanding of what the economic dynamics of this are going to be. Right now, they've been able to expand it without burdening the direct New Hampshire taxpayers. It's all being, that delta, if you will, is really being picked up by the private sector. Well, that's going to get us by for a little while, but not for long. That's again, a 2-year Band-Aid on what is a real critical problem in this state. We need to, again, I believe Obamacare needs to be repealed. I believe the state has to take control of their own destiny. I think we need a governor that champions Medicaid block grant. Washington should be giving us the money because Lord knows it is our money. We paid our taxes for it. But we need to be controlling our own destiny with those funds, not having to play with the bells and whistles and mandates from bureaucrats in Washington, D.C.
One last question. Do you guys have any burning ones?
I'll go for this one. This is breaking news. It just happened yesterday, but the Speaker of the House kicked a conservative group out of the Legislative Office building and said it wasn't appropriate for them. If this was AFP, they were doing their pledge event at the LOB, and the Speaker Jasper said it wasn't appropriate for them to be using that public space. Do you think he made the right call there?
I'll say I don't care whether the group is conservative or ultra-liberal. I mean, the Speaker and the legislature do have the right to control who comes in and out. I'd like to you know, I think it needs to be encompassing and encouraging of all different types of groups. I don't know the speaker's reasons, so I don't want to take a side one way or the other. There could have been other extenuating circumstances. I don't know. But I do like the fact that we have open buildings in the state. I do like the fact that whether you're a conservative group or a liberal group, you can come in and use our public buildings as a platform for your advocacy on either side of the aisle. I think that's a fine thing. I don't want to speak directly to that incident yesterday. I don't know the details.
Speaking of open buildings, there's a proposal to lock the 2 back doors.
They've
of the
already
State
done
House.
it.
They've already done it.
I believe they've already done it. I was told yesterday that they've already done it.
In favor or against?
Against. This is the State House of New Hampshire. We should have those doors open. People should. For hundreds of years they've had access to the longest continually used State House in the country. I never like the idea of locking doors unnecessarily. I understand that they're basing this around quote unquote safety precautions, but look, the State House has always been open. It's the people's State House, and I think it needs to remain that way.
Well said, Councilor Sununu. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You will no doubt be back again.
I hope
We
so.
can beat you up some more.
No, nobody beat. No, I don't feel like I'm getting beat up. That's just part of. It's good to ask tough questions. I'm number 7 of 8 kids. Trust me, it takes a lot to make me feel beat up.
You're the penultimate.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the time. I really do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Tui, go write a story.
Yes, sir.
Bossy, go bash him editorial.